Hello guys, in this video we will install JMeter Remote on EC2 instances. For the purposes of this demo we will create one controller and two injectors. I am going to call the first instance JMeter controller. Leave the Amazon Linux AMI. Let's create the SSH key pair and download it for later use. Please notice that I left the default Create Security Group checked. And also allow SSH access only from a specific IP address. And let's hit Launch. The next two instances JMeter Injector 1 and JMeter Injector 2 are going to be identical to the one we just launched. So I will fast forward through them. So far, we have created 3 Linux EC2 instances, which we will later configure to run JMeter Remote. So here I SSH'd into our EC2 instances using the respective SSH keys we generated earlier. The Amazon Linux AMI we chose doesn't have any JDK installed, which is a requirement to be able to run JMeter. So we will install the JDK on each instance and also download JMeter. Now that we have the JDK and JMeter installed, we will configure JMeter. In the controller, let's open jmeter.properties. We will start by specifying the IP addresses of the hosts which will serve as injectors. To do that we have to look for remote hosts. The default is localhost. Let's delete that and replace it with the IP addresses of our EC2 instances. JMeter requires a reverse connection in order to return sample results from the injectors to the controller. The default is 0, which means JMeter will choose a base port randomly, but we don't want that, because we will later need to authorize the reverse connection ports and the corresponding security groups inbound rules. For the same reason we should also choose a specific port for JMeter server engine. Lastly, we will disable the RMI's SSL. And that's it for the controller's configuration. The only difference when configuring the injectors is that we don't have to set remote hosts, but we still have to do the rest of the steps. Now we are ready to launch the injectors. So here we get a memory error simply because JMeter is asking for more RAM than the EC2 instance can afford. Instead, we can tell the JVM how much RAM it should allocate when launching the server. The two JMeter servers that act as injectors will now sit listening for the controller to initiate the communication. The next thing we need is a JMeter script to test if our controller can initiate a communication with both our injectors. I will SCP a test script that I previously recorded from my local computer to the controller. Now that we have our injectors listening and uploaded our test script, let's run our first test. Our controller gets stuck while trying to configure the remote engines and fails after timing out. Which is not surprising, because we still have one last step to accomplish: configuring the firewalls. In AWS, this means configuring the security groups of each instance by adding rules. Let's jump back to our AWS console. Starting with the controller, we will click on the EC2 instance, then go to Security and click on Edit Inbound Rules. Here we will allow the port 4000, which is the server engine port for injector number 1. And we will do the same for injector number 2. We will also allow the port 4445, which is also called the stop test port, for both injectors. Lastly, we will allow the range 50,001 to 50,003 for the reverse connection. But why a range? We established that JMeter requires a reverse connection in order to return sample results from the injectors to the controller. But we only specified one port, which was 50,000. While that's what we call a base port, JMeter will open up to 3 ports beginning with the port we define +1. In our case, JMeter may open ports 50001 to 50003. Now we will configure the injector's inbound rules. The first rule is allowing the port 1099, which is required to establish a connection from the controller to the injector, to send the test script, for example. We should also allow the port 4000 for the server engine to function properly. The second injector is identical to the first one. Now that we have all the pieces, let's try and run our remote test again. We can see that the remote engine have been started on both injectors. After a few seconds, the test will be stopped and the result file will be available. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and see you later.